Welcome back to another episode of the St. Louis Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Brown. Thank you for listening today. And today we have an emergency podcast. We had some stuff come through St. Louis within the last week, and we are going to talk about it. There are some other things on the agenda as well for us to discuss today. So as always, thank you for tuning in and welcome to the St. Louis Podcast. Please like, review, subscribe, leave a comment, share with a friend. Show us some love. We appreciate everyone's support. So, first on the docket, tornado last Friday. Let's talk about it because there's been a lot of talk about government response, about government planning, about the sirens not going off in St. Louis City. So we're going to hit on all of that stuff. I think a lot of people are just listening to like clips online and not really looking at what the issue actually was, especially with the siren aspect. In St. Louis City, and everyone just being completely, I mean, we're behind the times for sure. I was making a joke earlier. I was like, what is this lost where we have to press a button in order to turn on a tornado siren instead of just being connected with the National Weather Service, and when a tornado warning is issued for an area, just automatically goes off. I'm sure there's some sort of expense that goes into that, and that's why, of course, most things don't get done. Because we spend our money on dumb shit and not on stuff that, is obviously going to save lives and affect people. So let's talk about it. So obviously last Friday, May 16th, a tornado came through. It started right around, actually in essentially downtown Clayton, a little bit south of downtown Clayton, right down there, and essentially went northwest northeast from there. Caused over $1 billion in damage, and I'm sure that number will increase across a 23-mile path of destruction. It was an EF3. I know it wasn't an EF3 the entire time, but it was an EF3 the majority of the time. And of course, that means that maximum wind speeds were reaching 152 miles an hour. And I'm sure if you're in St. Louis, or even if you're outside of St. Louis, you've seen videos, countless videos, online of just absolute destruction, roofs completely being torn off, trees being decimated and being, thrown into buildings, or being, obviously being tossed into buildings and things like that. So there's massive destruction up in that area. And of course, we had power out for a long time, and I believe, I'm not 100% sure, I'm sure I'll get into it here in a second, but I believe that there's power still out in some areas. And of course, we're now sitting on a week. So I'm recording this Friday, May 23rd. We're sitting a week away from when it happened. Obviously, we have, critical failures in the city's emergency management system. Obviously, the complete breakdown of the tornado siren activation protocols. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about the Emergency Management Commission, Sarah Russell. Now, I think she definitely did some things wrong, but I definitely think she's being used as a scapegoat as well. Because the process and the protocol that we have in place, which of course I guess she could technically overhaul, is archaic and outdated, as most things are. It's not a simple process that would be followed by, say, a company such as ourselves that has a specific process in place for things that we do. If this happens, then this happens. So we'll get into that as well. Obviously, we had fatalities from the storm, which is terrible, and unexpected. I know the last time we had, or this was the deadliest tornado since February 10th of 1959. So it's been quite a long time. Obviously, there's tons of injuries as well, a ton of property damage affecting, areas of Delmar, Natural Bridge, Union, Vandevender, Forest Park, Central West End, Clayton, I mean, you name it, they got smoked out that way. And of course, it even crossed the Missouri River, not the Mississippi River, and continued into Illinois. So, of course, we have Kara Spencer assessment placed the total damage over $1 billion, making this one of the costliest natural disasters in St. Louis history. The extensive damage prompted the creation of the City of St. Louis Tornado Response Fund in partnership with the St. Louis County Foundation to facilitate recovery donations. As of May 20th, so that was Tuesday, Approximately 21,000 homes in Missouri remained without power, with Ameren working to restore electrical services across the region. There were traffic lights still out on major intersections along 40, like Lindbergh and Big Bend and Hanley in that area, up through the beginning of this week. Obviously, recovery efforts have been complicated due to the sheer scale of the destruction. Thousands of structures requiring assessment and repair across the tornado's 23-mile track. So, of course, the most significant controversy surrounding the tornado response centers on the complete failure of St. Louis City, outdoors warning siren system to be activated during the emergency. Sarah Russell, commissioner of the City Emergency Management Agency, also known as SEMA, was attending an off-site workshop at 1520 Market Street when the National Weather Service issued the tornado warning at approximately 2:30 p.m. This location that that Sarah Russell was at, prevented Russell from accessing the siren activation button at the SEMA office located at 1915 Olive Street. Now, keep listening. When Russell attempted to coordinate siren activation through the St. Louis Fire Department, the communication breakdown proved catastrophic. Fire department officials reported receiving ambiguous orders from Russell, leading them to decide against activating the 60 outdoor tornado sirens positioned throughout the city. Obviously, the failure represents a critical breakdown in the emergency management protocol that exists, which I just talked about, specifically to protect residents during severe weather events. Now, of course, we know that Mayor Spencer placed Sarah on administrative leave, emphasized that the directive to activate the sirens was ambiguous, which cannot happen when a tornado is sweeping through the city. In St. Louis, and safety depends on being alerted immediately. And just so everyone knows, in St. Louis, there are ways to get notified. And I think a notify STL is a big one. Go ahead and just type that in. You can go to the website and it'll tell you the numbers that you have to text, what you have to text to a specific number to get updates for severe weather events. And of course, if you had this set up, you would have been notified. So I'd just like to say, first and foremost, at this point in time, we have so many different avenues of severe weather alerts. If it's through weather apps, even if it's turning on like KMOV or Fox, KSDK, when there's severe weather in the area. And what I go ahead and do a lot of the time, if I know that there's a possibility of tornadoes, which there was that day, I listen to Ryan Hall on YouTube, and I think I've talked about him in the past. He called some of the tornadoes back in March, earlier than the National Weather Service did, which allowed a lot of his listeners down south here of St. Louis, I believe in the Union and Farmington and that area that got hit by the past storm in March, to get to cover sooner than the actual alarms went out. So there are people that you can listen to online. Usually what I do if there's a severe weather outbreak and I'm worried about tornadoes, which of course in the past, right, we're Midwesterners. We sit out on the porch and watch storms roll in. We're crazy like that. But we're not used to the severe weather and really the tornadoes that we've been seeing, throughout the last, throughout this year. So with that said, there are get weather apps. AccuWeather I use. It's free. It's a little bit annoying that it has ads sometimes, but I do like the map on there. NOAA has a weather app. Of course, you have local weather apps like KMOV has a weather app, right? Fox has a weather app you can get notifications from. So have that stuff set up. Also get on Notify STL if you're located in the St. Louis region as well. Those are both great resources and avenues, just to make sure you're prepared. Because the last thing you want to do is be relying on a siren that, sounds, 3 minutes before a tornado touches down, instead of knowing in advance, potentially that there's a large cell accumulating, and it'd be smart to get inside and take shelter. So back at this. So of course, the investigation revealed multiple systematic issues beyond the immediate siren failure. Protocol confusion emerged as a significant factor, with the standard operating procedure drafted in 2021 by Russell, potentially, though, never being fully implemented. So it sounds like they were potentially between protocols. No one knew exactly what the protocol was. And of course, that creates ambiguity. and issues because no one knows, do I do this or do I not? But I think that, you would just think that you'd go in the sense of caution and just push the button. But of course, that's easy to say as I'm sitting here talking in a microphone about it, and was not there when the situation was happening. So, with that said, the big issue was about whether SEMA or the actual fire department held primary responsibility for siren activation. Obviously that contributed to the communication breakdown. So Mayor Spencer signed an executive order to completely overhaul the siren activation protocol. Under the new system, the fire department assumes sole responsibility for siren activation, operating from a continuously staffed office to prevent future failures. Captain John Walk from the St. Louis Fire Department has been appointed to lead SEMA until a permanent commissioner is selected. So a little bit of background. Testing of the reform system revealed additional technical problems with the fire department's activation button found to be non-functional. Until repairs are completed, fire department personnel are stationed at the SEMA office 24 hours a day to ensure immediate siren activation capability. These reforms demonstrate the comprehensive nature of the emergency management overhaul required to restore public confidence in the city's warning systems. So let's talk about some of the response that we've had, some of the local, state, and of course federal response, and we'll get into, of course, some of the things that we can be doing, as people in St. Louis or the surrounding area as well, or wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like, you can help, you can donate, you can offer, you can donate obviously money, and then of course direct goods as well. So we'll get into some of those too. So obviously the big thing is, where's FEMA? So Mayor Spencer has publicly criticized the delayed federal response to the St. Louis tornado disaster, specifically highlighting the absence of FEMA personnel on the ground. During a Monday interview with MSNBC, Spencer stated FEMA has not been on the ground. We do not have confirmed assistance with FEMA at this point. This lack of immediate federal presence has frustrated local officials who argue that disasters of this magnitude require national level support and resources. The mayor's appeal for federal assistance emphasizes the broader challenges facing cities across the nation when confronting major disasters, which there has been obviously a lot this year. Just look at, the fire, multiple fires that took place in California. Spencer argued that cities across the nation, when they are experiencing disasters such as this is what the federal government is for, highlighting expectations for rapid federal mobilization during catastrophic events. I think she's got a point there. The delay in FEMA deployment has become a significant political issue as recovery efforts continue without federal coordination. It's odd, right? In the time that you need them, they're not there. Governor Mike Kehoe has actively pursued federal emergency declarations to unlock immediate disaster relief funding. His office released a statement emphasizing that local first responders, officials, businesses, and volunteer groups are working around the clock to recover, but the task before us is tremendously large, and recovery will not be easy, of course. Kehoe's request for a federal emergency declaration could provide an immediate $5 million infusion of federal funds while enabling the major disaster declaration process. Well, $5 million will get us a little bit of the way, I guess. To start, the governor's coordination efforts represent a crucial bridge between local recovery needs and federal resources. His acknowledgement of the tremendously large recovery task underscores the scale of destruction that local resources alone cannot address effectively. The state-level advocacy for federal assistance demonstrates, of course, the multi-governmental coordination required for comprehensive disaster, obviously, response. So obviously we need to overhaul a lot of these systems that are in place, which it sounds like is being done right now, because the last thing we need is for this type of issue to happen again, especially when we know, it happens once, great, let's fix it so that way we don't have to, worry about this type of situation happening again in the future. It should be pretty, simple. It sounds like the protocol just needs to be fixed. Someone actually needs to be put in charge, and they need to be They need to be available 24 hours a day to be in charge, I guess, of pressing this button that I still am like, why do they have to press a button? Seems like it's outdated technology. I mean, what are we doing here? And of course, a button is good. Fine. That should be like the secondary thing. If like, you know, the automated response doesn't go off, sure, you got someone there that can press a button, but it should be, you know, we shouldn't have to rely on a person to press a button. It should be, you know, kind of the last line of defense, at least in my book. And I'm not an emergency response person, so I'm sure people in the emergency management, community would disagree with me, and that's fair. Of course, we have, streets department crews continuously working to ensure all the routes in the affected areas remain passable. I was just down in Clayton earlier today, and they were hauling loads and loads of trucks full of limbs, trees, branches, and they actually had police escorts escorting them around, which is pretty interesting. So they're trying to get this stuff cleaned up as quickly as possible. So shout out to the people working hard on the ground, really making this happen. There's a lot of people donating, not only their resources, but their time. When of course, I'm sure there's other things in their life that could be taking their time right now. So, we'll kind of get into what we can all do here to help with the recovery efforts. So let's get down here. So, okay, volunteer efforts. Let's talk about it. So there's quite a few organizations right now. There's quite a few places where you can directly go and donate. So let's go through some of that. That way you guys know. And of course, we'll probably just make this into a clip. That way you guys can just share this, let everyone know. So organized cleanup initiatives. We have the St. Louis Early Childhood Tornado Response Team has emerged as a critical force in restoring educational infrastructure, focusing on repairing 14 damaged child care centers across the hardest hit neighborhoods. Volunteers with construction experience are prioritized for these efforts, though general support roles remain available through their online registration portal. So go to them, St. Louis Early Childhood Tornado Response Team. Simultaneously, For the Culture STL and Action St. Louis coordinate daily supply distributions. They require, over 100 volunteers per shift to manage logistics at their central hub at 4343 West Florissant Avenue. So For the Culture and Action St. Louis, go search them online. We'll see if we can link some of this stuff below for you guys just to go ahead and click on. AmeriCorps has established a volunteer reception center serving as the primary coordination point for skilled labor deployment. The program specifically recruits electricians, roofers, heavy equipment operators to address complex structural repairs while maintaining general volunteer opportunities for debris removal. Their morning briefings at 7:30 a.m. daily include safety certifications for specialized tasks, with over 2,300 volunteers processed in the first week post-disaster. So good job, guys and gals. Shelter operations support. So Red Cross shelters at Friendly Temple Outreach Center. That's at 6356 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive. And 12th and Park Recreation Center at 1410 South Tucker Boulevard. They require overnight staffing, and they're looking for male volunteers from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. security shifts. The Refresh Community Church, located at 829 North Hanley, has implemented bilingual support teams to assist Spanish-speaking displaced residents, coordinating through Gilberto Pinella's Office of New Americans. So if you know of anybody that falls into that category, please send them their way. Volunteer medical professionals can register through the United Way STL portal to provide on-site care at those shelters. So we're also looking, of course, for some skilled labor as well. So please, if you're in the medical field and you feel like volunteering, check out United Way STL's portal on their website. As far as donation materials are concerned, we need construction materials, tarps, sheets of plywood, exterior grade wood screws, duct tape, medical supplies, emergency supplies, first aid kits, disinfectant wipes. Water is a big one, obviously, as always, in any type of in any type of natural disaster. Water is a big need. So there are quite a few different people that are helping out with this coordination effort. One such company is RX Outreach. Shout out to those guys. RX Outreach Relief Fund. They're processing 200 plus daily requests for prescription replacements. So if you're needing prescription replacements, requiring specific donations of insulin, anti-hyperintensives, and inhalers through their verified pharmaceutical partners. Betty Jean Care People's Health Center offers free medication storage at 5701 Delmar. That is for displaced residents. Excuse me. So there's a ton of different opportunities for people to get involved in the St. Louis area. Obviously not all of us can donate time. So what I ask is, if you do have the availability to do so, donate some resources to these guys. Donate some money to these guys. They're our neighbors. They deserve support. Also, what we have, United Way STL's 211 hotline. They've fielded 8,400 plus calls since activation, connecting residents with 3 primary assistant hubs. That, of course, being some we've talked about: North City Resource Office Center, South Side Assistance Hub, and Downtown Coordination Office. There are also Catholic Charities operating marks until units providing insurance claim assistance, FEMA application support, and mental health counseling. We've got the bullet-related injury clinic has repurposed its Foundation Park facility at 3220 North 14th Street into a 24-hour crisis centering offering device charging stations, trauma wound care, and legal aid services. Oh, also add on to that list, I forgot, battery packs, ways for people to charge, obviously, their items, especially if they're out of power. Restore STL coordinates structural assessments through its volunteer architect corps, scheduling 150 plus daily property evaluations. You can reach them at their text line, 314-339-4025. Once again, 314-339-4025. Their Thursday and Saturday work groups focus on emergency home stabilization using donated materials. The city has established 6 primary donation centers operating from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Northside Depot at 2500 North 11th Street. That's construction materials only. Central Supply Hub at 3431 Union Boulevard, household items. South City YMCA at 3150 Sublet Avenue, medical supplies. St. Louis County Library branches are accepting donations through, it looks like, the 28th, so you definitely have some time. Battery-powered lanterns, shelf-stable baby formula, hygiene kits. Of course, we got financial contribution channels like I've talked about before. The Disaster Relief Fund, that's for long-term rebuilding. Looks like we've raised over $2 million for that. Tornado Response Fund, immediate needs. There's $850,000 distributed so far. So, we're going through it right now in St. Louis. There's a lot of ways to help. There's a lot of ways to volunteer. All I ask is that if you have the opportunity to do so, go ahead and get out there, either with your time or with your donations. These people that are affected are definitely going to appreciate that. And this also highlights, making sure that you're prepared for something like this to potentially happen in the future. You want to have basic emergency kits, obviously, at your house, first aid kits, things like that. Obviously, you want to have, some backup water, some backup batteries for power, some emergency food potentially. I'm not a prepper here, but, it'd be nice to have 48 hours, worth of things. That way, if you do, power does go down for 48 hours, you're not completely stuck relying on people around you. You have stuff that you're able to, obviously, do yourself. And it's always nice to be prepared. That is the Boy Scout motto, after all. So this kind of leads me into really my next point, which I've been talking to, quite a few people about over the last couple of years. And it's really a big tension point. in St. Louis and St. Louis County. And I think it's something that really needs to be addressed. So, obviously, the big issue with St. Louis City and St. Louis County is that, in my opinion, we're separate entities. So I went ahead and did a little bit of research, obviously, beforehand, and I wanted to look at how many cities are actually separated from their outside county in the U.S. Is this a normal thing? What are the cons and what are the pros of this situation? And what I've learned, and of course, take it for a grain of salt. I'm not a genius. I'm not an expert, right? Not an expert. In this, I just, I read, I consume information, and, hopefully I'm usually right, or at least partially correct, right? So what I found out is that for the most part, if you just look at the data, look at other areas that have done this and haven't done it, it seems to be that there's more cons in the situation of having the city be separate of the county. And I'll go through some of that stuff, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this fact. But I honest to God think, and of course this is my opinion, that the city and county need to come together as one. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have people leave St. Louis City. And that's actually one of the reasons why we're at the number one or number two most dangerous cities, is because other cities like Los Angeles City is a part of Los Angeles County. So if we're only looking at just St. Louis City, yes, we're more dangerous. Now, if we add in the whole entire population of the county, all of a sudden we drop down to underneath Phoenix, which I believe is ranked 7th. So it's still not amazing, but it's not the highlight number 1 or 2 we see all the time, which I guess isn't technically fake news. It's just, people are looking at it in the wrong circumstances because they're looking at it as, well, St. Louis City. Yeah, most of the time, that would encompass all of it. In this circumstance, it's only encompassing the city itself. So, let's get into this. So, research suggests. So this is some of the thoughts. So I'll just kind of put these out here. We'll talk about it. Research suggests, St. Louis City and county separation is uncommon among large U.S. cities, with most being part of county structures. There's only other few major cities like Baltimore and Virginia Beach that are independent, similar to St. Louis. The evidence leans towards St. Louis structure being an outlier, given most large cities are integrated with the counties. So let's talk about it. St. Louis City operates as an independent city separate from St. Louis County, a structure that is obviously not typical for most large U.S. cities. Most major cities are part of a county, sharing governance and services, while independent cities like St. Louis are rare. This separation was established in 1876. And we'll kind of go into that day, and I looked up some history about this and some research about this, and it was super interesting. Actually, the history, or not, the History Museum here in St. Louis in Forest Park does have, I don't know if they still have the section about the history of St. Louis, but that was always pretty interesting learning about, why this all kind of came to fruition, and really some of the subtle racist undertones, I will say, that led to kind of, this happening in the first place. And, now we're at a situation where we're like, why would we want to fund, St. Louis City if you live in the county? It's like, because it's St. Louis City. You live in St. Louis. Don't you want a good city? If you don't have a good city, eventually the county is just going to fall apart, I would think. And I'm sure I could do some research on that and look into that. So let's talk about it. So, okay. So the St. Louis City is an independent city, obviously meaning it's not a part of any county, including St. Louis County, which surrounds it. This happened in 1876, driven by political and economic tensions, with the city seeking greater autonomy over taxation and governance. As an independent city, St. Louis functions as both a city as a county equivalent for census and administrative purposes, with its own government managing services like law enforcement and public utilities. So, Research indicates that this is not common for most major U.S. cities, as we've talked about. Most large cities are part of a county structure where they may share governments and services with other municipalities within the same county. Independent cities are rare, with only 41 such cities in the U.S. as of recent date. Of these, 38 are located in Virginia, where state law mandates all cities be independent, a unique provision dating back to the 19th century. Outside Virginia, the independent cities are Baltimore, Maryland, St. Louis, Missouri, Carson City, Nevada. Among these, only Baltimore and Virginia Beach have a population over 300,000. So they're much smaller or recently below the threshold. So the rarity suggests that most major U.S. cities such as New York, L.A., Chicago are integrated into county systems, making, obviously, St. Louis independent an exception rather than a norm. But why is that case? So, 1876, right? Let's go back to this. Let's talk about it. So, all right, I'm back. All right, let's talk about some of the pros and some of the cons. Let's get into it. So, cons of the separation. I'm sure a lot of us just see it in day to day right now, but the city's population and economy has obviously declined while the county grew. Service duplication. We have redundancy in services, like 64 police agency, wasted resources, and of course it hinders efficiency. And I'm sure you guys are well aware of that live, in the county. And it really... It's just duplicative services. So let's talk about it. So the separation, St. Louis population peaked at 880,000 people in 1950, but declined to 308,000 by 2017. And I believe it's in the 200,000s now as of this year. And of course, St. Louis County grew. We're now over 1 million, reversing the fortunes. Decline has left the city with fewer resources, jobs, and opportunities, with the city losing retail, corporate headquarters, Centene, in major employers like the GM plant. Duplication of services. This is what I was talking about. So the separation has led to significant duplication of services across 91 municipalities, including 64 police agencies, 43 fire districts, and 26 emergency call centers. This redundancy wastes tax dollars, with a 1959 study suggesting potential savings of $40 million annually by combining departments. And that was in 1959. Let's call it over 100 million now, which is crazy. Lack of regional planning. The separation prevents coordinated regional planning, which is crucial for economic development, infrastructure, and addressing shared challenges like transportation and public safety. The city's fixed 61 square mile boundary has fenced in growth, limiting its ability to expand and adapt, dropping the fourth to the sixth largest city between 1910 and 1920. Wow. The city and county often compete for jobs, businesses, and resources, which could be better managed as a unified region. For example, companies like Centene Corp highlights how the separation can lead to a zero-sum game rather than net regional growth, with the city and county vying for economic development opportunities. If we were one, we just work together. Fragmented governments, right? The separation has resulted in patchwork government system, with the city bearing the cost of suburban sprawl without reaping its benefits. And of course, there's a reason why the county doesn't want to do that, because they're reaping the benefits. The fragmentation complicates long-term planning and regional cooperation, leading to damn the city's stance with historical racist overtones, as noted by historian James Neal Prim. Negative impact on regional reputation. The separation affects how the region is perceived nationally. For instance, St. Louis City's high crime rate is not averaged with the county's lower crime rate, potentially harming the region's overall image. Like I was saying, a unified region could rank us as the seventh largest metro area in the U.S., just behind Phoenix, enhancing its appeal to businesses and investors. The separation was allegedly illegal, as the scheme of separation was submitted after midnight on July 3rd, 1875, of course, a national holiday. The initial vote actually failed, 11,878 yes to 11,525 no. In the city, and 2,617 no and 848 yes in the county. a recount marred by allegations of fraud, flip the outcome, adding a layer of complexity to the region's administrative history. There's a lot of cons. There's some pros. Autonomy of the city. St. Louis City operates as an independent entity, allowing it to tailor its own processes and governments to its urban needs without interference from the county. Of course, this autonomy was a key resource for the separation in the first place, as city leaders sought to maintain control over their affairs. They were not looking into the future. The separation has been in place for over 140 years. Time to take a look at it again, providing a long-standing structure that some may view as stable and traditional. The historical precedent can be seen as a pro for those who value continuity and established systems, offering a sense of identity and government consistency. Of course, as an independent city, St. Louis City has its own government and representation, ensuring the urban interests are directly addressed without being overshadowed by suburban or rural concern. This can be beneficial for advocating the city's specific needs, such as urban development and infrastructure. I think the cons outweigh the pros in this one. I think we should be working together as a city and as a county. I don't think there should be any competition in the matter. I think we should want the success of both. I think people in the county should be proud to go downtown, and not be scared. And I think one of the ways in order to help with that is by combining the county and the city. And I'm not the only one. This is not a hot take. This may be a hot take for some of the older folks. I get it. The younger folks, though, talk to a lot of people. They think this is a good idea. I live in the county. I've lived in the city. I think this is a good idea. Now, I'm sure there's cons to doing this as well, right? But I'd like to look at it from an overview of, what about the next 50 or 100 years? What's going to be best for the people living in this area? Is it just going to continue shafting the city and just continue people moving out, continue with high crime, continue with people scared to go down the city and participate in sporting venues or, the culinary scene that we have, in the city, or all the things that we have to do here in St. Louis, especially obviously in the city. So with all of that said, please go and support St. Louis if you can. I listed out a bunch just a couple minutes ago in ways that you can help. If it's just donating supplies, if it's donating your time, if it's donating money, please go ahead and do that. We do need support here in St. Louis, and we should show some love to our fellow St. Louisans. As always, that is another episode of the St. Louis podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate everyone's support, and we do love St. Louis. So, again, show us some love. Please like, review, subscribe, comment, share this video with someone. I talked about a lot of the issues that we face with this tornado, maybe some potential ways that we can fix it. And looking at the future of St. Louis, I think there's a lot that we can do to really better the city and better the county. Let's just make it one. As always, every single week, have to shout out Half Coast Studios here in St. Louis. If you want to record a podcast, if you just need them to edit and distribute it, if you need someone to cut up clips and post them, they can take care of you here at halfcoaststudios.com. And of course, the best damn marketing company on the planet, Vi.Media. You can visit us at Vi.Media. Type in Vi Media on Google. Or of course, if you just want to, reach out to us, you have questions, you can do that at stlouispodcast.com. You can just directly message myself, Eric Kempf Brown, across the board. And that's been another episode of the St. Louis podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week. Goodbye.